myself in a minute, but maybe put either Charlotte or Chance on the spot and have them introduce themselves first.
Be happy to go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte McGee. I used to be a student within the program at the Sorensen Impact Center and within University Venture Fund. And I recently came on after defending my PhD in neuroscience into a full-time position as Senior Associate in Impact Investing. So thrilled to be here and hope to keep connections open as we move forward. Chance, on to you.
I guess that obviously shows everyone who has the brains, which by default means I'm supposed to have the good looks. I'm Chance. I've been with the University Venture Fund and Sorensen Impact Center as a student originally, but then as a full-time staff member since 2017. And we've been investing in early stage startups around the US that are both profit-seeking as well as impact-minded. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today, but happy to be here, happy to collaborate however we can. So looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. I'm Jeramy Lund. I'm the managing director of the University Venture Fund 2. I inherited part of a program that goes back to 2002 technically, but 2004 was when the first UVF was raised. It was and we'll go through this in a little more detail in a second, but it was external to the university. And that was for a lot of reasons. UVF2 actually lies within the university, and we'll talk about the benefits of both of those today a little bit, and happy to field questions on it because it's an interesting dynamic both ways. I inherited the program in 2015 with a surprisingly simple promise, and you always have to be skeptical of those, and my story tells you why if you've never been burned before. Got approached by the Sorensen Impact Center and said, hey, we have LPs lined up, we have documents done, we need to put a face on this really cool student impact fund, and if you sign up for it, we'll have it closed in 3 months, and you can be working with students and making investments in cool companies. For a lot of reasons, some of those we'll go over today, some we can get to in Q&A. It took me 3 years to get it raised. Finally got it raised within the university, got all the approvals, had to go through academic senate and a bunch of other stuff to get it approved. And, hired Chance pretty quickly thereafter to help me out with the fund. One of the things I knew I needed, and maybe, we'll just start, but one of the things that I knew I needed, technically I am a part-time employee. Because I have about 20 years of venture background experience, I do other things on the side. And so this was more of a supervisory, kind of making sure that nothing gets dropped in the institutional knowledge piece of it. And I needed somebody that would do some of the more grunt work, if you will, with students. I would say Chance doesn't do grunt work anymore. He more runs the fund for me. I get to do some of the portfolio management and other things, but he's really the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. So with that, I think let's kind of start walking through a deck. And again, feel free to stop me as we go through this. But what makes us different? This shows some of it, and this again is more pitch decky. But for this group, I think one of the things that makes it different is we have an actual captive fund. UVF2 is an $8.2 million captive fund. So not huge, but it is captive, and it's not something where you're looking to donors every year to replenish. I think, the second piece to it is because we've been doing this and because we have other clients. So we also do the investment analysis for a local foundation. That gives us the ability to have 4 full-time, 5 including me, employees working with the students together, looking at the investments and doing other things. And as a result, we can really focus on the student piece of it at the same time we're focusing on the investment piece. UVF3 is really going to build on what we did in 2. It's going to be industry agnostic. In 2, we'll show some examples in a minute, but we're kind of all over the board in terms of what impact we're targeting. All of them, however, target social impact and really have the potential to be able to move the needle financially, we think. How we're structured for UVF3 is different than 2, and I'm happy to share the university piece with anybody afterwards for UVF2. But I will also walk through why that's probably a bad idea if anybody's thinking about it. To put it in perspective, so UVF2, again, is within the university, took us 3 years to do. For UVF3, what council, OGC actually told us, our internal council, we want it outside the university. I don't want to touch that again. I don't want to go through the headache again. We don't really ever want to do that again. So please just do it the same way as UVF1, where it's outside the university. So kind of interesting to have the university itself say, hey, you've got to take a different approach. But it's a standard GPLP. What we do is really have pretty much all of the advisory fees pass through to our group at the university. We are university employees. So makes it nice for benefits and other things. But it passes through an outside advisor who then contracts with the university for our services. We give 25% of the economic rights of the management fee to what we call student experience. Part of that is honestly our salaries, but part of it is things like bagels in our Friday meeting and student travel and other things like that. And then the same with the carry. The fund does have a 20% carry, but 25% of that carry ends up going to a student scholarship should it actually be in the money. So, it's kind of it's an above average fee, but part of it really is going to the student experience. And we blend PRI capital together with normal, financial capital to make the fund structure work. So it's kind of unique in that way. Why us?
Hey, Jeremy, did the university provide any of the money? Like, so PRI side or the CRA side, is any of that coming from the university, or is it all?
Yeah, the 25% of Fund 2 comes from the endowment. About 5% of Fund 1 came from the endowment. The big difference between Fund 1 and 2 for us is we got CRA dollars into Fund 1. When I was raising Fund 2, there was an interpretation of the Volcker rule with the CRA banks where they couldn't invest in venture funds. So we couldn't bring them on board. So the university's venture check was actually bigger into 2 than 1. But it was, a much bigger percentage as well. It was really difficult to get that money, to be honest, for a lot of reasons. It is one of those where if you're the endowment officer, you're charged with getting returns and other stuff. And a student-centric venture fund, even with professional management, is riskier than some of the access you'd have otherwise. So there are reasons for that. But yeah, we did get a check from them. Hopefully we'll be able to at least return the money, but it was like pulling teeth and required some big donors flexing their muscle a little bit to get it done. And that's, most of my other LPs are big donors to the university. So pretty much exclusively.
So they kind of view it in a venture philanthropy way, I guess, right? Where they're
absolutely. It's funny. I just sent the report for Fund 1 that I inherited back to the original investors, and everybody, we only return capital on it, right? Which in the venture world is horrible. And everybody was like, "Wow, wait, that I just viewed it as a charitable donation, and I got my money back over the course of it. That's awesome." So, I think that's the mindset of a lot of them. Jim Sorensen definitely views it as an investment and holds our feet to the fire in terms of what the financial return is as well. So, but really good question.
And will you be getting money from the endowment for the third fund?
TBD. We're early on in that. We think the good news is CRA banks can now supposedly invest in venture funds. So, being in Utah, that's a big deal for us. We have a lot of CRA banks for the size market we are, and they're looking for creative ways to invest money. The way the endowment has been managed has changed a minimum of 2 times in 3.5 years since the university invested. So I don't know the true answer to that question right now. I'm working on it. How about that?
That's great. Thank you.
This is our bragging chart. So again, we do have Tuck on here, but we believe we have more employees working on it, and we have a captive fund versus the year to year. So this is the way we look at the social impact space in general. Again, take it with a grain of salt. We're trying to raise money. UVF in general. So, UVF was launched in 2001, 2002, 2004, the fund was closed. UVF2, we launched in 2017 and closed on 8.2 million. And we're targeting, 20 million for UVF3 because of the CRA factor, getting closer to where we were on UVF1. Same investment thesis as 2. UVF1 was a standard venture fund. So there was a difference between UVF1 and 2 in terms of thesis. One of the things I think we're all most proud of is the fact, we have students like Charlotte that come on to work with us and come in not knowing a whole lot about business and come out knowing a whole lot about business as well as neuroscience. But then we have, people like Colton, who was a former student and used it from an entrepreneurial angle, has co-founded a really successful local self-storage company. One of our other portfolio investments, Ryan Smith, Recyclops, our students actually helped him understand his unit economics. He said, these are my unit economics, and it was by each person who signed up for the subscription service. We helped him realize it's actually per municipality he serves, and he needs to think about it in that way if he wants to scale successfully. And then, also really try to provide some post-investment support in addition to the investment piece. Key statistics on UVF1, we graduated 350 students. We had, 24 investments with 11 exits, a fair number of write-offs. And again, we returned capital on that one. So decent outcome for the funders. Few names you might recognize on there that we were able to invest in out of UVF1, some local Utah companies and elsewhere, but we're able to have some good names on there that students get to think about afterwards and say, I was part of that transaction. UVF2, we launched in 2017. We've invested in some really cool companies doing everything from early air raid warnings to neuroscience to Recyclops that I just mentioned that does curbside recycling in rural America and has now been invested in by Clorox and others. We've already graduated over 150 students with that program and made 18 investments in 3 years. So we're closing that one down to open up Fund 3. This is the slide I was talking about earlier where, we're in ed tech, we're in straight impact, we're in envirotech, we're in fintech, we're in health tech. We're looking at things that are both doing social impact as well as have the possibility to scale massively. So, a lot of different industries to try to get your head around, and a lot of different business models. And I will get to Bill's comment in a minute because that is the single most important thing that we're going to talk about with inside and outside. Again, a couple of the companies that we talked about, we are primarily invested in Utah, but with some sprinkling elsewhere. And that was also by design. We said, if we're going to do impact, even with a broad lens, if we're really just Utah, that makes it super tricky. So we need some geographic diversity in terms of who we're investing in.
Is there beyond the geographic, is there a requirement that there's a connection to the university?
No, that was another piece that was very much, and it's hard to get people's head around. But if we wanted the return, we purposely decided that they didn't have to be university tech. Now, by design, or not by design, but de facto, Let me see. BlackRock has University Tech, Navigen does, Utility actually does. So, a third to a quarter of our, quarter to a third of our companies have University Tech in some way, shape, or form in them. In the student question I will get to in just a minute. It's a really good question, but we've got a slide for that in just a minute. And now I lost my chat window. Hold on just a second. Now I lost everything. Okay, there we go. Sorry. And also to the alumni-owned question, no, we don't. I should say we don't. I would say, and I'll let Charlotte or Chance jump in as well, you have a better chance at getting to the top of the funnel if you're an alumni-owned or can get in through our, basically our LP or our close network, the way any venture fund is. But you don't get a leg up. We've got, we've seen a lot of med tech and other stuff that come through one of the LPs in UVF1 who's not in UVF2. And they didn't even make it past the phase 1 because of various hurdles that we found while we were doing it. Queuing up the students. This is our application process for the students. So this is a hack. So first we screen everybody and kind of look at their resume, and by and large, unless there's something glaring in there where we're like, absolutely not a fit, we will let them go to the next piece, which is the memo. The memo piece is interesting, and I think we stole this from Northwestern or Chicago or somebody else, one of the other student venture funds. But we send a memo out on a Friday. We let the students know in advance, you're going to have a weekend to do the memo. Send the memo out on a Friday and say you have until Monday to complete it. You can talk to other students. You can talk to your professors. You cannot talk to the company. You cannot talk to the company's customers, and you cannot talk to any staff at Sorensen Impact, but complete a memo and give them basically no direction aside from that. We usually have about a 50 to 60% completion rate on that is all. And that's by design. It helps us know if the students have impetus to do the program. When Chance first started, we used to actually get the resumes, do an interview process. Then we'd have the memo. We'd let them come in to present the memo. And then and we gave them like a week or so to do the memo. Then we'd have them come in to present without ever looking at the memo in advance. Like they just came in to presented it. And that led to a lot of students that got into the program that gave a great presentation first time, but didn't have the impetus to really work on it. And less motivated students, I would say now, we probably only have once we make a selection. So sorry, after the interview, do your memo, do the interview. Then we sit down and select and kind of force rank people. And I'd say about anywhere from 20 to 30% of the students that submit a memo and do the interview end up getting into the program. So it's pretty selective. Like we go from 100 students, 120 students down to 10 to 15. We probably only have a 10 to 1 to 2 students a semester that we end up having to kick out after that right now. So the new process seems to vet out a lot of students early on, which is nice. And you can move them forward and be able to really have them be part of the program. Once they're in the program, it's kind of a 3-step process and it's not time bound. So everybody starts off as an analyst. We are doing real-time training while they're working on live deals day 1. So your first meeting, there's going to be some training involved, but you're also going to get staffed on a deal and say, hey, start learning about this. Staff does all the training. We meet every Friday from 9 to 11 for our staff meeting where we go over the deals that we're working on and what we want to go over. And then 11 to 12 is training afterwards, and go over, here's a few of the things that we think ought to be standardized across all the students. once somebody starts to distinguish themselves and starts to really like they can take a section and run with it a little bit, they're promoted to associate. And they're really starting to contribute to the due diligence. Then they're helping the analysts out a little bit with the problems they face. And as you level up as an associate, you become a senior associate. And those really are kind of, very similar to an associate at an investment bank, where they're the ones really leading the deal. Staff, typically we're working on 3-ish deals at the same time. So we can't focus 100% on any one deal. We're there as an associate or as a resource for all of the students, but especially for the senior associates to help drive the deals forward. But the senior associates are the ones we try to put down with, you're responsible for the deliverables here. And one of the reasons we do that is not just to push the workload down, but I think it's what levels up students through the program, right? They now have real world experience they can take to their, first or next job and be able to say, I've led a team through a really chaotic process that's, very much driven by real world outcomes. So pretty standard progression. Don't know if there's any questions on that before I move on.
Yeah, so are these typically undergrads or grad students, and then how long would they normally stay in the program? Is that a 3-year progression, or is that done in a semester that they go from analyst to senior associate?
Good question. Undergraduate all the way to postdoctoral, which creates its own set of challenges, as you can imagine. We ask for a 2-semester commitment when you're signing up for the program. I think, 1 semester, you barely get to where you're really adding to the team. You get a lot your first semester, but we don't get much out of you, to be honest. So it's more of a, give me at least 1 semester afterwards. And, typically I would say most stay for about a year. We get, our best senior associates end up staying for 2 years because they get so much out of it. And typically they are a post-grad that comes on right off the bat, or they are somebody like Charlotte, who's a PhD student who needs a little additional time to really digest the business aspects of it. There we go. Yeah, Chance is putting in the chat that 2/3 are undergrad, and the rest are MBA and PhD. So, it's very much across the board, and we try to get as much time out. We just had one of our PhDs that stayed on for I think it was 3+ years.
That's right.
And was great. Like he could have been staff at that point in time, right? Like he had instant recall and could remember the deals from 2 years ago. And so we'll take them however they come.
Do you pay the students, or are they all doing it as kind of all, or do they get class credit, or is it all kind of club volunteer?
More club volunteer. That's the bane of our existence, is the true answer. We'd love to be able to pay them because they do actually work really hard. We pay during the summer so that we can at least compete with summer associate jobs. But during the year, we don't pay. We do have scholarships specifically targeted for the UVF program, a couple of those. We have, roughly $50,000 in scholarship money we can help award. And then, I think we can give class credit. Especially for the business majors at the U, there are so many required credits that almost no students take it for credit, except for it's my senior year and I need to plug this one hole, but I want to stay on with Sorensen, so I'm going to do that. So that's generally when they take it for course credit. But for the most part, it is to put on their resume, as we let them put it on as a job because we view it as a job. And, the good thing when they talk to existing students, or especially recently graduated students, most of our students credit this program with getting them whatever job they got into, as opposed to any sort of coursework or anything else. And I got to be careful with tenured faculty about that. But, it is one of those where it's I think the academic rigor also paves the way, but it's the real life experience and being able to say, there's this one time I was on this deal and this happened and I was able to do this around it, that puts you over the edge in an interview. Again, really quickly, we have, so staff sources deals, obviously. We also try to have the student source deals, and post-COVID, this has been a lot easier because there are so many virtual demo days that we just, put a couple students on it and say, hey, let's see if there are any companies that are interesting to you. We then kind of get involved in the early stages of diligence to at least weed out some of the stuff early. We then push them to get a full investment memo, and our investment memos, which we'll get to in a second right there. So we have a screening process, and the screen is very light, done by a student on their own. Even if they're junior, we just have them do it. And it's basically like, should we put a couple students on it and move forward? A phase one is a little longer doc, probably 2 to 3 pages, where you're really looking at the team, the industry, some competitive advantage, and what the impact is. Should we spend more time on this? And then we discuss that at the Friday meeting. If we're going to investment committee, we go to what's called a phase 2 memo, and that's anywhere from a 20 to a 30-page document. It's pretty heavy, and it's a lot of research in it. They then present to an investment committee made up of professionals, and that's the other area that requires a lot of work from Chance and Charlotte and others, is getting the teams ready to go present, because our investment committees are not rubber stamp committees. They actually, like, part of the reason why they're there is to ask the students tough questions and see how they react to it. And I think that's one of the biggest things that really get the students across the finish line, is understanding that how much prep it takes to spend 30 minutes presenting an idea is something you don't necessarily get in the normal course of your schoolwork, but it's something that they get multiple times over the course of the program. And then the investment committee are the ones that make the investment decisions, right? It's not the professionals at the center, it's not the students, it's the investment committee themselves. Again, we've had great students. 100% have said they learn new skills, so it's not like they just turn out. We've had students, that's, I think, one of the other unique things. While we are based at the University of Utah, UVF has always been an open enrollment program, especially since not all students are taking it for credit. So we've always had students from BYU, Utah State, Westminster, which is another local school, and the University of Utah there. Recently, we've had UC Berkeley, University of Michigan, Cornell, Washington University, others, and we're going to try to continue doing that, where we can offer something, especially for the schools that don't have either a venture fund or an impact fund, a way for students to be able to participate. And it's nice to get differing student opinions in terms of what's going on in the world. We've placed students in some really great jobs afterwards, and we're not going to take 100% of the credit for it, right? They are all great people. But Kat, I'll call on for a minute. She was a PhD student, came in honestly not knowing the first thing about accounting or finance or anything else, threw herself into the program over the course of 2 years, really distinguished herself, and ended up getting a job at McKinsey afterwards. So, I mean, super driven, motivated person, right? But the program really changed her trajectory from being in a lab for the rest of her life to doing McKinsey and a bunch of other crazy stuff. Me again, 20 years of investing experience. Carl, who's not on the phone with us, is newer to our team. He's been on about 2 years now. He had 10 years of venture experience before he came on. Chance has been with the center for, roughly 7 years now. So now has 7 years of venture experience. And then Charlotte and Jose were both senior associates in our last class, and recently joined us as full-time employees. So really strong team, have leveled up, and can help us work on both the student and the investing piece at the same point. With that, I will stop the formal presentation and happy to answer any questions.
What's the minimum dollar amount that you think, I guess, staffing? So was that list all the students that are currently a part of the program? So is that kind of the
No, that's just kind of some selected. So yeah, one of the questions, we typically have about 20 students in the program at any given time. And you know, it's a lot of work to keep it at that number. Let's talk about some of the pressures for a minute, because this comes back to the development office as well. One of our internal pressures is the school, well, the former dean of the business school, who's now the president of the university, very recently here, he always wanted us to have more students, right? Like, why can't you have 100 students? And we always said it'd be easy to have 100 students. Like, we get that many applications. It's just the quality would suffer and morale would suffer because you'd have a lot of taggers on. So we constantly maintain the balance on the students in terms of how do you keep enough high quality students that you can get throughput. You know, we close roughly 20 investments a year, which is insane in the venture world, right? And that requires a ton of diligence. So how do you have enough students that you can do that level of throughput with 5 full-time staff? But I don't know that there's a right number of how many students. I think part of that is how many deals do you want to do over the course of a year, which comes back to how much money. 8 million was awfully small, right? That's what we had. And fortunately, we have the benefit of having an endowment that's helping subsidize the program, as well as a business school that's helping subsidize the program. And then again, we have the other revenue stream in terms of foundation dollars coming in to pay to do investment support off there. So we're doing double duty with the same team. My short answer is any amount of money is real. So I talked to the professor that runs our student impact or student investment fund, which is an equities fund here. That's not, it's a fictional fund, right? So it's, you know, one of these mock funds that's easy to figure, not easy, but easier to run because you have real-time prices on it. And she comments to me all the time, your students just take it more seriously because they're writing real checks. And it's something we as staff talk about a lot, right? You know, if we're getting down to the wire and a team's indecisive about whether they want to make an investment or not, you're like, this is $100,000 check. Like, you'd better have an opinion. No opinion is not an opinion. Say yes or no, it's real money. So it makes a difference. I think the biggest piece, if you can get a dedicated fund versus not knowing what's coming in the following year, right? That helps you. Number one, it helps you teach a lot of things around portfolio construction and thinking about how you want to run the fund out and some other things like that, and really thinking about return of the fund. And here's kind of a double or a triple, but we need a 10Xer now, you know, something with 10X potential to be able to try to get the return on the fund. So that part's pretty key. I think, you know, the pieces you need ideally is a dedicated fund of, let's say, north of 5 million, but like we've internally discussed fund 3. And if we don't think we can get it to 20, it may not be worth our time to try to do. But north of 5, if you've got one professor working on it, let's call it. 2, you need somebody who's willing to stay with it and be able to be the institutional knowledge. For one of our calls this afternoon is for an investment we made 2.5 years ago, right? We got to work through maybe a restructure, maybe something else. And you need the institutional memory of being able to do it rather than just, it's a constantly rotating professor, or it's a constantly rotating student group. And I think, you know, the third piece to it is you really do need university buy-in for why you're getting it done. And whether that's, even if it's just within the business school, but you have a strong advocate in the dean, I think it's possible to get it done. You know, development office is definitely one of the linchpins of that. And they do push back absolutely because they can't get their heads around it. Now, the funny thing is, now that we're established, at least within the business school's development team, they look at it and say, wait, the scholarships for this program are something I can go sell, right? So this is a different story for me to go tell our donors than I've been telling them, which is just a generic scholarship, right? This is a program where students are really helping to change the world, and they get to, you know, hopefully again soon go to Africa on trips and visit the portfolio companies that we're doing for Jim's foundation, and, you know, do a lot of other cool stuff too. So that was one of it. The other thing that I found in getting back to inside versus outside the university, I don't know whose idea it was to pull it within the university, but I remember this was 2+ years into it. We had, you know, a meeting around the big round table in the president's office that had your, you know, the cash control people, the endowment people, you had president's office, you had office general counsel, you had like all the parties involved, right? And somebody looked at me straight faced and said, how can you promise me that you're not going to lose money on any of these investments? And I said, I guarantee you, if I'm doing my job, I'm going to, because otherwise I'm not fulfilling my fiduciary obligation to the LPs. And like, just look of horror on their face. It was not, it was a legitimate question. The fact that that was my answer was like horrifying to them. The other issue that came up, for everybody's edification, was carry on the fund. And, you know, this was a different meeting, but somebody looked at me and said, okay, so what happens if the fund's a breakout success and you end up making $1 million on the carry? And I said, well, I'm happy. And I guarantee you that all your LPs, who are also big university donors, are pretty happy. So you should go talk to them about increasing their scholarship commitments. And they looked at me and said, yeah, but we can't have that, because if that shows up on the paper that you made more than Kyle Whittingham did, then we're in trouble and you're in trouble. And so we got around that by putting a ceiling in. So if that were to happen, which I don't foresee that happening on an 8 million, I mean, it'd be great if it did on an $8 million fund, right? But don't see it happening. But they will only pay out $250K a year until the full amount's paid off. So, you know, we had to work through a lot of silly structuring things like that in my mind, but it's from a university perspective, it was just a much different beast. And that's why when I went back for Fund 3, it was one of those where they said, hey, just keep it outside the university. We don't ever want to go through that again. I don't want to go. And, you know, even the president of the university is now the former dean of the business school, so he'd be a huge advocate. But because of all the politicking that had to happen with all the different colleges, it was just like not worth it.
You didn't talk a ton about the impact side. Like, is that, I mean, is that kind of a cool story and that gets you the CRA dollars, or is that really not a lot of what you guys think about in the diligence and construction?
Yeah, opposite. And I'd love Charlotte or Chance to weigh in on this as well, but I'll take it for a second, which is the reason why I didn't mention that is that's like the very first gateway, right? If we can't make a compelling argument for the impact, then you've got to just say, let's pass by on it. You know, there are those that have the potential for huge financial impact that you might downgrade how high your bar is for impact on it, right? But we really try to make impact be the very first screen in what we're thinking about. And I would say the other piece to that is the way we think about impact is whatever drives the dollars, the revenue dollars, must also drive whatever the impact for the company that we think it is, right? So buy one, get one models just don't fly. You've got to be, you know, the more revenue you drive, the more recycling you are doing. Therefore, we're okay with it, because we don't want a company to get in a situation. Cotopaxi is a notable local example. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're an outdoor clothing company. And one of their pieces of special sauce is sourcing materials and labor in like far off regions and really empowering local artisans and others to be able to make a living while they're fashioning their clothes. And when they took their first round that was slightly less venture and slightly more PE. Since then, they've come under a lot of pressure to try to pare down on that a little bit and do other things. And I don't know, post-COVID, whether a little bit of that is less now, because you don't want everything coming from China either. But it's, one of those where we really try to look at impact being driven by, or the impact that we want to see driving the dollars that the company wants to see as well.
Jeremy, some related questions on that. I'd love to hear a little bit more. I know Cotopaxi is a certified B Corp, and so wondering if you've got a lot of B Corps, or perhaps, I mean, they are now, but perhaps they weren't when you invested in them. But if you're thinking at all about including sort of B Corp and the B impact assessment in any of your screening processes?
So the answer is we have 2 certified B Corps in the portfolio, I believe. We don't add it into our screening necessarily, just because we're trying to be a little broader lens, right? I think it's a helpful framework.
Mm-hmm.
My feeling on B Corp is it does help, like Cotopaxi. Davis has used the fact that he's a B Corp to push back against his investors and said, you read the docs when you came in, so deal with it, buddy. Right. And so I think it's very useful in that way. I think, it can be, at least talking to some of the other later stage VCs, it can be a positive or negative thing.
Mm.
So it's not just a one size fits all approach in my mind. I like B Corps. I'm torn by them because I see both sides of it. But yeah, we do have B Corps, definitely not exclusionary. I love the fact if you're a B Corp, it helps me out. But it's not that we would only invest in B Corps.
Yeah. No, I was asking, one of the programs we have here at UNH is a B impact clinic, where we're training students in the B impact assessment methodology, and then they're working with local companies to get them certified. And so I was thinking about, so there could be some really cool connections between that program and our venture fund here at UNH. So
and I think if there's an area where we're weak, it is post, while I talked earlier about our great post-investment support, if there's an area where all of our team would love to do more, it's in things like that. So let's take a company that's not a B Corp coming in, and you look at it and say, you'd be a great fit for B Corp. And in fact, we think applying the methodology would drive both your profitability as well as your impact. And here's why. And we have students to help you with the process because you're so busy as an entrepreneur, just keeping your ship afloat, that you don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Like that could be a really interesting differentiating feature for you, I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And then just another question. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your deal flow, and sort of how you're sourcing deals, who you're partnering with, where that sort of deal flow comes from.
So all over, like everybody else, it's, to a certain extent, it's network driven. So Carl was in the venture industry beforehand. I was an angel investor and also part of some of the local venture groups. So part of it comes from that. Jim's a well-known active impact investor. So we get a lot of inbound deal flow. And, directly through his foundation as well. His foundation will send us deals. The students, again, we'll have them sit in on demo days and other things. And students have found companies that we've invested in, and even BlackRock that was on there. I forget how exactly it came to us in terms of deal flow, but it was one that Chance and I looked at and said, don't know anything. I mean, it's neuroscience, like whatever. Charlotte was our senior associate at the time and said, can I take a look at it? And we were like, sure. And she came back to us and said, this is a really good company and here's why. And took her a couple months to convince us, but we finally dug into it with her and then took it in front of investment committee and, made an investment. So it can come from students, it can come from staff, it can come from our investment committee as well, is actually a really good source for deal flow. We've tried to have a pretty diversified, we've got one guy with SVB in San Francisco, and then Mike Dutton, who runs the Builders Fund, which is more of an impact PE fund. But so beg, borrow, steal, cobble it together any way you can, right?
But you don't have a formal partnership with like your local angel investing group or anything like that. It's just more sort of informal. And
Yeah,
your personal
informal, yeah,
networks.
Village Capital, like all the
Mhm.
usual suspects in the impact investing world,
Mhm.
Owl Ventures, Learn Ventures on the ed tech side. And so it's more of a informal, show us deals, we'll show you deals, and just kind of try to keep everybody's in mind. But that is part of staff's job, is to reach out to other VCs to try to create relationships and understand how we work together and co-invest.
Yeah, that's great. And then just one last related question. Are you giving preference at all to alumni, and how do you, are there any like specific mechanisms by which you are looking at businesses that are coming out of university incubators or university VC, sort of social venture courses, things like that?
So not for UVF. The interesting thing though is we are currently trying to spool up a fund that is around the Lassonde Institute at the University of Utah, as our entrepreneurial arm, if you will. And we are currently spooling up a fund from another donor that wants to focus on the entrepreneurship department, and that will invest both in professor and alumni-led companies, as well as our Masters in Business Creation program, which is a new way to get a master's here. And our group will be running that because we're already, it's the same diligence. We'll just be removing an impact screen, right? We're doing the diligence. We're doing a screen for how you're affiliated with a university. But that's a separate pool of money. And that's kind of one of the interesting things we've figured out by running effectively 2 funds for the last 4 years, is with the same group of students and the same staff, you can kind of run separate funds depending on what the donors want to focus on, and just kind of create the funds for them. And that's another way to get, to Jeff's question earlier, the other way to get to 20 million is $4 or $5 million funds. And even though you're doing a little different tweak, if the materials can be roughly the same and you're just doing a little different screen on the front side, maybe all roads lead to Rome. So I think we don't do it for UVF, but I can totally see that being a piece that certain people are interested in. And in my mind, it's been easier to treat that as 2 separate funds than trying to figure out how you have both impact and the university connection and have a return and,
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, no, go ahead, Abigail.
Thank you. I had a quick question when, speaking, I guess, maybe more specifically when students are speaking to potential companies and things like that. Curious how you guys frame your value proposition. I think you mentioned like 100K. I don't know if that's like your average check size, but if you have like a strong relationship with your portfolio companies, if you're offering kind of, guidance or things like that. And then kind of secondary to that question is, when looking at the size of the companies you're investing in, are you concerned at all with like the additionality of your capital, or you guys are just kind of like happy to jump on board if it looks like a good investment?
So trying not to complicate the issue, for UVF, we don't care about the additionality of the capital. In fact, because we are impact and finance equally driven there, we don't mind being last money in. And in BlackRock, crowded ourselves into a round that was well oversubscribed. And the reason why they let us in is because we are a student-centric university fund and they had university technology. So they were like, we'll throw you a bone. And we're perfectly comfortable with that from a UVF perspective. The Sorensen Impact Foundation is not at all comfortable with that. They like to be but-for capital. And so on those deals, if it starts to get to be a little bit of a frothy deal, we'll just pull out of it altogether because we want to be catalytic capital there. Value proposition is super tough. Here's my callous answer to that. I'm very jaded. So, and I'm black and white in situations like this. Most companies want to ask you what your value proposition is. Almost none will hit you up on it afterwards. So we will say, hey, look, we've got a group of students that really care about, what you're doing as a company and the fact you're doing impact as well as trying to drive a profit. If you have projects you want us to work on, let us figure out how to do that. in the 50 investments we've made in the last 3 years, I'd say we've had 2 companies actually take us up on that value prop afterwards for what it's worth. So, and we're not pushing it either because we're kind of capacity constrained, right? But it's more, I think that the piece that people will use us for and hit us up on a lot is if we are the main impact investor in the fund, like if we're the one that's saying we're impact investors and the founders care about the impact piece of it, they will have us talk to the other investors if the other investors are pushing them to something against the impact that they're going after. And we'll sit down and say, look, we don't want to screw up the profitability of the business. Here's why it's important, both from an impact perspective and a long-term profitability perspective, and paint a different picture than most founders are able to credibly paint with their investors, if that makes sense. But good question.
And I'm looking at the clock here. I know we're coming right up on 4, but Jeff, it sounded like you had a question. So maybe we can make that our last one.
Yeah, and quick. So based on the work you're doing for outside firms as well as the management fee revenue, are you guys then self-sufficient? You mentioned that, I mean, maybe operationally the university is paying your salaries, but is the full-time staff covered by those revenues?
So we will be, now that we have the 2 funds in place. Well, once we get this second fund spooled up, we will be 100% self-sufficient. And that's part of our mandate. Now, arguably, we've always been self-sufficient. It's a question of how you allocate the endowment dollars and whether there's a charge for overhead of being part of this bigger group. But yeah, no, part of our mandate is to be self-sufficient in terms of, as a center, we need to be, and in general, we want to be self-sufficient. So yeah, good question. But that's why the 20 million number, right? Is as we look at it, we're, what we're facing with UVF2 is we'll end the 5-year investment period and the fee will step back down, and then we will no longer be sufficient. So that's part of why we're raising Fund 3 as well. Thanks, everybody. Nicole, I will send you a copy of the deck if you can distribute it out along with my email. And if anybody has additional questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to talk one-on-one with any of you.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I'm just dropping in the chat as well the Google group email listserv address that you're all on. So I know we didn't get to it today, but if anyone has updates or any big asks of the group where they'd love to connect on a specific topic or share specific resources or knowledge, feel free to send that out to that email address to make those connections offline as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.